What is up, Aspire leaders? I hope you are able to sit back, relax, drink a warm cup of Papa Rob's coffee, and soak up all the wonderful information from our awesome guest, Henry Turner. But before we begin, I want to let you know that this episode is sponsored by Toddle. Toddle is an all-in-one teaching and learning platform used by over 40,000 educators around the world. If you want to learn more about this wonderful application, you can head over to toddleapp.com, and on that website you can see the many features offered in this wonderful platform, hear from other educators on how it has transformed their campus, and dig into the many case studies provided on how all of these educators have streamlined their teaching and learning needs with the Toddle application. Today's guest is Henry Turner, a fantastic principal, an author, and a national speaker as he shares his experience as an innovative instructional leader, passionate advocate, and committed educator with organizational leadership. Make sure you stay with us as we talk not only about his book, Changing the Narrative, how to foster an anti-racist culture, but also about how he improves student voice every single day on his campus. Welcome back, everyone, to Aspire to Lead, where we will be discussing the visions, inspirations, and experiences from top educational leaders. My name is Joshua Stamper, and you can connect with me on Twitter or on Instagram at Joshua_Stamper. Henry, thank you so much for joining me on the Aspire to Lead podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here with you.
Henry, I got a chance to meet you in person at FETC, and it was such a joy to get to know you a little bit more and hear a little bit about your story, but I would love for my listeners to hear about your educational and leadership journey.
Yeah, it was great to see you too, Josh. It's always great to see the educator that I really look up to, virtually, and to really get to meet you in person. Leadership has been a real passion of mine as an educator. As a young person, I was put into a lot of different leadership roles, whether it was class officer or captain of my high school swim team. But I think one of the moments that really hit me was my first year in college on my swim team. I was, had a really good season. I was starting to feel pretty burned out in our spring season. And I asked the coach, "Can I take the day off?" And he said, "You of all people, you're like a person that is a great leader of this team." And I was 18 years old. I had never thought of me in that role. And so it was that conversation left an impression on me. Additionally, I've always been a person that's really passionate about doing right for people, standing up for those who, feel marginalized. And so I've been I've sort of led, I think, by example in that realm. And so as a first year teacher, I really got involved in, working with kids and standing up for kids who, didn't feel like their voices were there. And I think that gave me some opportunities when a principal, my principal said to me, "We'd like you to be in charge of our mission statement committee for our 10-year review." And that was the first time I ever led a committee. And I was probably 25 years old at that point. And I got the bug. I got the leadership bug there. Got involved in a education leadership program. And that's when I realized that all of the work I've been doing and the leadership roles I had, that I really had a passion for it. As much as I had for teaching and for the content I was teaching, history, I had a passion for leadership. And so, I've pursued that passion for a while, both, professionally as a assistant principal and a principal, but also my doctorates on leadership. And it's really just been a passion for mine. And now I feel really honored that I get to mentor a lot of aspiring leaders and talk about the messiness and the fun and sort of the skills of leadership.
Well, I want to talk about some of the passions that you have, and one of them really comes out in your book, Change the Narrative, How to Foster an Anti-Racist Culture in Your School, and absolutely love the text, the resource. Will you just share a little bit about the book and why you wrote this?
Sure. So I've been an educator that's been passionate about social justice and standing up for traditionally marginalized groups. And specifically, I've worked in majority white communities, and we've seen students of color who have felt like their voices aren't heard, but also from an academic standpoint, we've seen a disparity in terms of academic performance. I have learned a lot over the past 20 years as an educator, and then particularly as a principal. I've been in the school that I'm at in Massachusetts for 7 years. We started to have some hate incidents in the first beginning of my tenure there. in response, I learned to work with our students and to support our student voice to be able to stand up to hate incidents and how to empower teachers and educators to understand that the importance of our relationship building, the importance of culturally responsive practices, and how we can really tie in a lot of the instructional practice that we know that work for kids when we focus on getting to know who they are and making sure that they feel seen in our school. So I felt really confident in some of the work that we had been doing going into 2020 when we saw the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and others. And there were a lot of educators who were looking at their own bias, at their own role in systemic racism at that time. And I had been doing a lot of writing, and I felt like it was time to write a book. And fortunately, I was able to partner with Dave and Shelley Burgess and with my co-author Kathy Lopes to write a book that's for school leaders on how to create a culture that is committed to standing up for all kids. And I think there's a lot of great books that are out there for how to do your own work from a diversity, equity, and inclusion standpoint. This book is really about leadership, how to empower leaders and give leaders the tools to help others to build those skills. And so, when I first started in my school, 50% of our Black students were on an IEP. And there's a clear overrepresentation of Black students on IEPs in special education. And there were people in our school who thought we were doing the right thing. They thought we were supporting kids because they were struggling, not recognizing that we were labeling kids disabled when they were not disabled, and that there was racial bias in that practice. How do we address what the problem is, and then what are the strategies we can do to dismantle the systemic racism and create an environment where we can support students when they struggle, and we can do it in a way where students feel good about themselves and are not labeled. I always say there's nothing wrong with being disabled, but there's something wrong with calling someone disabled when they're not.
Oh, for sure. 100%. And that was something that on our campus, we started to look through, all of our groups as far as representation, not only in special education, but then also in our gifted programs too, and seeing that there were, some disparity in those percentages also. And so I'm just thinking through, for our leaders, if they're listening to you as far as diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racist, like what can they start with on their campus to kind of help through making sure that everyone is represented?
For anyone, you want to do your own work first, right? You want to understand what is your role, in your understanding of race and racism, and your role as an educator. As educators, whether you're a teacher leader, whether you're an administrator, we can move the needle a lot by just modeling our work, right? Like, how do we create a classroom where every student feels like their voice is heard, where every student feels like that we're all standing up for each other, and that it's an environment where we can have difficult conversations, but we're listening to each other. That in itself can model great behavior or great practice for other educators. I always talk about strategic thinking. As leaders, we want to think about, like, how do we identify what's a topic that you want to focus on, whether it's your personal work, whether it's how you interact with your colleagues in a diverse school environment. How do we raise up student voice? How do we work with families? What does our curriculum instruction look like? Identifying what is that topic, and then taking a systematic approach, starting with, like, what are our values in this area? How do we then how do we create some systems and structures that allow for our values to exist? And then how do we then take on the unchangeable? As educators, sometimes we want to take on the most difficult topic. We want to overhaul our grading practices, and we fall flat. Right? We need to take a more systematic approach of what are our values, what are some structures that we can create that allow for our values to exist, and then take on some of the more challenging aspects in that area.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
So you talked about culturally responsive practices in the classroom. As a leader, what were some ways that you were able to evaluate where you were to make sure that you were making the right changes?
I mean, I think as an educator, I think that we want to get to know who our students are first, and so then understanding their cultural background. One of the easiest things that we did, and I always say to schools, that schools where they're getting a lot of resistance around any diversity, equity, inclusion change, the easiest thing we ever did was that we allowed for students to write their name phonetically in our student information system. And then in our student learning system, students record their name so that teachers can hear it. And teachers feel really good because on the day one, they can pronounce a kid's name accurately. Kids feel seen. There's no one that is going to a school committee meeting protesting that we are giving kids the permission to spell their name phonetically. I think, like in terms of culturally responsive practices, the most important thing we can do is learn who the kids are, learn about their culture, and then how do we help their culture to be incorporated into our classroom. So if it's a math class, how are we helping them to see who role models are, who look like them, who are who come from the same culture of these students? How do we take on word problems, problem sets that are about areas in the community for these students? If you live in an environment where nobody has a pool, why are we asking kids to, geometric questions about pools, right? Like we have to help students to be able to feel like they're connected, that they are relevant in the classroom that they're in. In an English or history class, certainly it's a little bit easier to be able to make sure that the books that we're reading have protagonists that are multidimensional, right? That look like them, that come from their culture, and to be able to have conversations about culture within the classroom. So I think those are certainly some of the more basic steps to the more advanced steps to culturally responsive practices.
You had talked about empowering students, and I love this idea so much. And obviously, they want to have a voice in all aspects of the school. So I'm curious, over the last 7 years as the principal of your campus, what are some ways that you are making sure they have a voice?
So second week of school in 2016, a group of students drove around our main driveway waving the Confederate flag. Another student caught it on videotape and posted it on Facebook. So that's how long ago this was, that Facebook was still very popular among teenagers. So it went viral. Instantly, students wanted to protest. Students wanted to walk out. There had been some previous racist incidents that had occurred in the school the years past. And I didn't have, this is my second week on school as principal. I didn't have the relationship with the students. Long story short, I found myself a few days later on a Google chat negotiating the terms to a student protest with 17-year-olds. And what I learned through that was if we can create trust with our students, that they're going to step up and really feel valued, and they're going to do the right thing. What happened in that, with that protest is that there were maybe like 500 students and adults in our cafeteria. There were student speakers. And what we ended up creating through that event was a guide for ourselves on how to allow for student protest. Whatever the topic is now, if students want to get their voice out, we now have a template for how to do it in a safe way where students can get a microphone, they can speak, they can voice, even if it's, a criticism of the administration of what we're doing, because we are the power to them in their environment, that they have an opportunity to express themselves in a safe way. What we also we learned from incidents that we've had where students have not been happy with our actions as a school. So, for example, when we had a couple of years later, we had some racist comments that students had made on social media. We felt that we had really addressed the situation very well as an administration. We had investigated it. We were able to respond. We were able to identify who did it. We thought that we did all the right things. We supported, the students who were most impacted by it. When we met with our Black Leadership Advisory Council, which is our Black Student Union, they said, "We didn't think you did a good job." And we said, "What do you mean? We did all these different things." And they said, "Well, yeah, you checked off the boxes, but you weren't angry. You weren't angry about it." And as administrators, we're taught to take a neutral position when we're investigating something. And here we learned that this is what had happened was something against our school values, and we didn't say that we were angry and upset about it. And that was powerful learning from our students. As a result of that conversation, we created a Human Rights Council where it's students from all different groups that meet with us. Now it's become more minimal, but whenever we do have a hate incident or some sort of incident in our school, we bring it to this group. We explain to them what happened, and they ask us questions about it. They check to make sure that we did the right thing. Whether it's a protest, whether they're participating in some educational aspect, or whether they're checking us as administrators or educators, or helping us create policy. We're giving students the voice to help create a change in their school.
That's so powerful. I want to talk about the community aspect also, because you've mentioned a couple times, and I think it's so important, even when you were talking about the protests, community members coming and potentially participating in that. So I'm just wondering, as you are working through the culturally responsive practices and the anti-racist leadership, how are you bringing the community in on that initiative?
Sure. So I think that our community is multifaceted, right? So we want to make sure that our students and our staff who are part of our school community feel that they are part of the change. We think that we want to make sure that our parents are as well, and recognizing that we're giving voice to all parents, and we're also making sure that parents who feel and family members who feel marginalized feel like they're connected, and that we're finding ways to reach out to them. We've used some great software and technology to to help us to be able to communicate in our live streaming videos, so that families can get interpretive services through that software. Recognizing that some communities may not read email. Actually, I'm learning that a lot of people aren't reading email these days, but what are some different ways in which we're going to communicate to communities so that they're hearing and staying connected in our school? With our extended community, we're bringing them in by showing the great work that our students are doing. Our cultural days, for example, are a great opportunity for our students to engage to talk about their culture and to bring in panelists and guests. So our Black Culture Day, our Jewish Culture Day, we have one from our GSA, Asian Culture Day. Like, all these different days are ways for students to express themselves and bring in panelists around their cultural topic. We now use our TV production program to record and live stream those videos. So now they go up on YouTube. Our community gets to see them. We've had our mayor reference these videos before. And so that's, a great opportunity to show the great work that our school is doing, but more importantly, show the great work that our students are doing. These cultural days are completely student run. TV production is a career tech program that's student run, and we're getting it out to the community. So I think that's some of the powerful ways which we're bringing the community in.
We're going to pause for a moment to talk about one of my favorite sponsors, Papa Rob's Coffee. No surprise, I'm currently drinking my second cup of the Papa Rob's special blend. Rob has a wonderful variety of medium and dark blends available at paparobscoffee.com. Definitely check out each and every one of his blends. However, I have a subscription. I actually have coffee delivered to my door. It's fantastic. It's fresh. And then, of course, don't forget that as an Aspire to Lead listener, you get a free code here. Aspire 15 gets you 15% off your entire order. Head over to paparobscoffee.com. I know you're going to enjoy every last drop of this phenomenal blend. It's fresh and comes right to your door. So make sure you go over to the website, Aspire 15, and grab that 15% off. And now back to our wonderful guest and interview. All right, so your book, Change the Narrative, How to Foster an Anti-Racist Culture in Your School. You not only have the book, but you also have an additional resource, which is the online course. So for those who are looking to have a supplemental piece to go with the book, how can they access that, and what's that all about?
Yeah, so people can go to my website, henryjturner.com, and they can click on the course right on the homepage and check it out. I hope people do. It's really a complement to the book. It goes in depth for educators on some of the different aspects of the school of anti-racist leadership. And I would say that we help educators to develop curriculum, or to develop workshops, to develop trainings for their staff, strategies on how to respond to a hate incident, how to make sure that colleagues are standing up for each other. So those are, it's a 4-part series. It's got a lot of great response. You get it for the rest of your life. So it's something you can constantly go back to. And I think it's a great complement to the book, and it allows for educators to go even deeper into racist leadership.
It's wonderful. So make sure you go to henryjturner.com, grab that wonderful additional resource for this book. And I want to talk real quick about some advice that you might have for our aspiring or current leaders. So for anyone that's thinking about potentially going to leadership, or maybe they don't even have a title to their name in regards to leadership, what would you advise them to do tomorrow or next week to enhance their leadership journey?
So the story that I give a lot of people who I mentor is the story that I had heard about a principal who, on their first day, walked into the building with their partner. The partner was a structural engineer and said to the principal, all of these vines that are crawling up your school are going to destroy the structural integrity of the school. And so you should cut them down. The very first action that the principal did is that they went to the head custodian and said, please cut down all these vines. So that was around like 8 o'clock in the morning on their first day. By 11, the superintendent calls and says, I heard that you'd cut down the vines in the school. And principal said, yes, the structural integrity, my partner had said that it was going to ruin the building, and I thought it made sense. The superintendent responded, over the last 25 years, every graduating fifth grade class has been planting a seed of one of those vines. And I've been getting phone calls from parents and former students left and right about the symbolism of these vines and how they've just been destroyed. And it's just a great anecdote that we need to walk slowly. And so I always say to new leaders, don't cut down the vines, to listen, to get to know who the community are, and that even sometimes some of our smallest actions can lead to big problems. And so walk slowly, get to know who people are, get to know the community, and then you can start making some of the more challenging decisions.
Yeah, I had a superintendent always say, never knock down a fence unless you know why it was built in the first place.
Exactly.
So he shared a very funny story about a very large dog that was on the other side of the fence that he took down, and similar to the vines, right? Don't cut down the vines and don't knock down that fence.
Don't knock down the fence. I like it.
Well, Henry, how can our listeners connect with you? Because you're doing so much phenomenal work, and I want everyone to be able to connect with you on social media, on your website. So how can they do that?
Cool. So people can find me on Twitter at TurnerHJ. Instagram or at Turner_HJ, and henryjturner.com. You can get access to everything that I do. I do a new bi-weekly newsletter. You can sign up there, and it is a lot of the work that we're doing that we talk about in the book, but also other aspects. We have from teachers to social workers to organizational leaders to CEOs on the subscribing to the newsletter. So we really try to cover a lot of aspects around social justice leadership.
Yeah, I would agree. I am subscribed to it. It's phenomenal. So anyone that's listening, please make sure that jump on the website, henryjturner.com, and subscribe right away. You will not be disappointed by any means. And then make sure you jump on the show notes and click on those links to connect with Henry as soon as possible. Henry, it was such a pleasure to meet you in person. I literally had goosebumps. I turned to my left and you were sitting down. I was so surprised to see you. It was such a joy to hang out with you at FETC. And like I said, your book's phenomenal. You're doing so many great things in education. And I just am so fortunate to interview you here on Aspire to Lead.
Well, thanks so much, man. I hope you saw my response as well when my eyes opened up to see you. So thank you for amplifying all these educator voices and doing what you do. Really appreciate it.